is to really put down on paper what it is you're trying to accomplish. So they have the expertise to really intuit what you're trying to accomplish because it is collaborative, it is flexible.
Hello, my name's John Ripma, and this program explores the heart behind the application, our weekly series that delves into the intersection of both the technical challenges and the human emotions that often come with a complex project to build custom business software. And we design these conversations for startups, entrepreneurs, small business owners who want to learn more about how to handle the ups and downs of digital software development. Today, we continue our conversation with Chris Shuba, CEO of Helios Quantitative Analysis. So, you brought up something, and this is personal to you, really, Chris. What were the personal demands on you, that required your personal resources in order to participate in the project, of course, but also to ensure that your vision was being executed, built the way you wanted it? So, from a time standpoint, from a aggravation standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, what were the costs that you experienced beyond just the financial that you experienced during the build? If you can think back a couple of years to remember what that was like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we said the word cost a few times here. I actually tend to look at it more as like an investment, right? I want to invest a certain amount of money and get a certain return out of it. That's why you're building the tech. And it's certainly been that way for us. But at the time, it feels like cost, right? Um, from my seat as someone who was not in all of the day-to-day meetings as it related, in this case with Experian, um, the cost or the toll, so to speak, that it takes on someone like me who's fairly type A is you do lose a little bit of control. Once you set your requirements and you turn your team loose and their team loose, they're off working and doing things and you're not in it, right? So keeping tabs on it from afar, it was a little bit hard for me to kind of stay out of it a little bit. I mean, everyone's a little bit different, but the way that I did it, and I certainly do it now because we continue to build software. I wish I'd done a better job of it in the very beginning. So I'll give you guys a little bit of tips here on the web, on the vidcast here is, as I already mentioned before, setting your requirements up front, but then also with your team, setting success criteria that are higher level and more outcome based than detailed, requirements that make a software program go. And that way, I feel like there's an alignment within my organization around what we're really trying to get to, right? So that if a requirement combination isn't really getting us to the success criteria, that we know then to pivot, right? Because otherwise, if you just march towards checking boxes of these requirements that have been made, the combination of them might not really be the experience that you want for your user, right? And so managing through success criteria, making sure that everyone feels enabled to raise the flag if they don't feel like a success criteria is being met, all that starts with really good requirements up front, and then having your team have that feature. It really does bring down that personal cost, but it's going to be time. There's going to be deadlines. It's work, right? But it's exciting work in my opinion because you're creating something cool that didn't exist before. So it's not just send an email and 6 months later software shows up. You got to do it. But the more command and control that you have within your own organization, the more that people really get what you're trying to accomplish at the high level, the more that problems will get sniffed out. And the real pain point is a problem is that's the pain when something breaks, something doesn't go right. You're like, okay, we just spent all this money and I don't like this. You want to do everything you can to avoid that, and we've had it happen. That's life. It's going to happen in your build. It might not be major, but it's going to happen. So
yeah. That's definitely good advice. But it's also good advice in the sense that the the keeping the beginning in mind, as you're working through the ups and downs and the problems as you're going through there, keep the vision in the forefront.
Mhm.
What it's going to look like is very important. It's very easy to get kind of knocked off and uh, go through the process and start, changing your mind a little bit to accommodate things and compromising here and compromising there. And all of a sudden, you end up where I didn't mean to end up here. So
Mhm.
being able to using the system, using the engineering process, that's one thing I think the engineering process does is it kind of forces you, if you're going to make a change, you really have to look all the way back to the beginning. That if I'm going to
Mhm.
make this change today from an engineering standpoint, I've got to actually look all the way back because there's a lot of connections that are dependent on this. So,
Mhm.
but let's do a little Dr. Phil here,
Mm.
if you're
Okay.
game, okay?
Sure.
So, how important and how big a deal is it for you as the CEO and the person who is paying for this to have patience and trust and confidence in no, between you and the developers and between you and your staff, who's operating for you, kind of like in between you, the visionary, and the developers. Um, how important is patience, trust, and confidence?
Mhm.
How important was that during the build and even today? Things are still moving forward. So address that. Do the Dr. Phil thing for me and just
Mhm.
just bare your soul here.
Um, well, I'll break them into pieces. I think trust and confidence is one conversation, and patience is another, right? So, once you get working with your tech partner, once we began working with Experian, you almost tend to think of them like employees, right?
Mhm.
They're not your employees, but they're part of your team, right? And so part of the selection process is do I trust and have confidence in these people? It's kind of like an interview, right? Same thing when I hire
Yeah.
someone. So I don't think working with a tech partner requires any additional leap of faith than just hiring employees to do it.
Mhm.
So that's why you do the interview process. It's why you make sure that they're the right fit. So I don't put too much emotion around that piece of it. If you are somebody who has problems with kind of the trust and confidence end of things, that just means that your team needs to put more work into um, really understanding and having your own resources around what they're building, on how they're building it, where it's being stored, et cetera, et cetera. So that if for some reason you decide you're going to switch providers at some point, you have control of everything.
Hmm.
That's a lot more work on
Right.
your team than having them do it or do it in duplicate. But there are ways that if you really have, kind of trust or confidence issues, that you can maintain a ton of control in the process, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, on the patient's end of things, that is reality. So, if you're a typical CEO or, a business leader of some sort in management, you want things now. And the reality of it is that building good tech is not a now thing. It takes time. And it's going to be directly reflective of, like we've already talked about 1,000 times here, how much work is put in on the front end, right? How collaborative you are and ready to make decisions and review, your side of things. Um, and then, it does come down to budget. How many people can you
Hmm.
throw at a problem?
Hmm. Hmm.
How many work streams can you be working on at one time? So there's a lot of levers that can determine how fast you're going to go. Most of them are going to be on your end, right? In terms of your team's ability to collaborate and set expectations and upfront and spend. Um, on their end of things, speaking, because my experiences with Experian, see how that rhymes there? Or it doesn't rhyme. What is
I
that?
see it.
Alliteration? I don't know what it's
Here,
called.
it's a
Anyway,
beautiful thing. Yeah.
that is, they're going to do things in a very process-oriented professional way, even when it makes me mad, right? So, I might say, well, hey, I need this thing built. And they say,
Really.
great, we're going to build it, but we also have to go through peer review. We have to document how we did it. We're going to do it to these code standards. and it's going to take, 2 weeks. And I'm like, no, I want it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Um, but that's part of, you're never going to regret doing it the right way first. But sometimes in our seat, you just want to go faster. It's just not going to happen. Tech is not fast. Good tech is not fast. So, the more that you can internalize that, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. A good tech is not fast. I think
Mm,
that's it's like that old saying, you can have people say, I want it good, fast, and cheap.
yep.
And the answer is, well, you can have one or two, but you can't have all three.
Right.
No such thing as good, fast, and cheap.
There is there
Um,
is relative good, relative fast, and relative cheap. And if you, like I said, if you do the things that we're kind of talking about here, you will get the tech you want at a reasonable time at a reasonable price. If you do it the right way, right? It's a good process. It's a really good process. There's no such thing as a perfect
yes,
process,
right,
but
right, right,
the
right.
reality of it is that driving, CEOs with a right now mentality are always going to have to be patient in one form or the other. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so, yeah.
And you can replace the word reasonable with expected, an expected
Hmm.
time frame, an expected cost, and an
Yep.
expected quality. All of that meets expectations. And so, yeah, that's what we strive for in the beginning and with the process. So, well, I'll
Hmm.
tell you what, Chris, we're coming to the end of this podcast. So once again,
Hmm.
thank you for your time, your wisdom, your experience, sharing it with everybody. It's a valuable thing, very valuable to hear, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, what your experience has been like. So
Hmm.
definitely appreciate it. And until we meet again, thank you.